Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most. And tweet, that's the sound of a whistle. We're talking sports on today's episode of JJ Meets World. And if you're a sports fan, buckle in because you're going to have to fill in a lot of gaps. If you don't like sports, good news. You're going to talk to two people who don't like sports to begin with so much. And then I find out a secret about Tucker that he actually is a sports fan going into this. Sit back, enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Ba 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 ba. That is the theme to Rookie of the Year by Bill Conti, who is the composer for that movie. Rookie of the Year came out in 1993. If you don't know the premise of the movie, it's pretty simple. It's about a boy who's bad at baseball, slips on a baseball, breaks his arm, and then the tendons heal really weird. And so now he's able to throw a fastball at 103 miles an hour, and he gets recruited by the Chicago Cubs. As I was thinking about this episode, I thought, you know what's one thing that we've never truly covered with a conversation between Tucker and I? We've had guests who talk about it, but between Tucker and I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about sports.
Okay. Hold on. Now, just so I remember, so this is the guy, his arm heals, and now he's got a fast pitch arm, right?
Correct.
Okay. And this is the movie that, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this memory is correct. That in the trailer, even, he whips his arm, breaks the doctor's nose, and the doctor says, "Funky butt lovin'." And then his buddy goes, "Did he just say funky butt lovin'?"
Yep, that's the one. That is the movie.
That phrase blew my mind when I heard it. As a kid, I was like, what did I just hear? Did I just hear a swear? I didn't know if I heard a swear or not, but it was something brand new and I didn't even understand the concept at the time, but it's always stuck with me. Funky butt love.
Yep. So here's the thing I didn't know. That movie was directed by Daniel Stern, one half of the Wet Bandits.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
And Daniel Stern's in it. So I watched it last night. And the blush is off the rose because there are some horrible editing pieces in there. At one point, it's I can't throw the heat. It's clearly in the middle of a conversation, and then it cuts to a plane landing.
Are you saying we need the Daniel Stern cut?
I think we do. I really think we do.
We need to restore the Stern verse.
I'm sure that the studio was like, listen, this thing's got to be 86 minutes long. That's it. 86 minutes. We've got some kind of new study that says kids only pay attention for 86 minutes. So Daniel, you're going to have to cut this down. And he's like, well, the first cut's 3 hours, 22 minutes. So, but we really get into the psyche of an 11-year-old boy. It reminded me of the fact that my knowledge and experience in the sporting world is very, very limited, but I think I do a pretty good job playing the part when I'm with someone who's really into sports.
Okay.
For example, when I got my first job in radio, it was on a morning rock station. I was doing a morning show on a rock station. And they said, okay, well, you're also going to be the sports guy. You're going to give the sports. And since it's rock, you're going to give the sports twice an hour for 3 hours in the morning. And I thought, well, it was nice knowing you. Call me if you need someone who's interested in the arts. And so I started doing this, and I would have people nonstop tell me his name isn't pronounced Thomi, it's Tomi, all these things that go into it. And I was like, okay, well, I know very little about what we're talking about. I don't know why they gave me this job.
And then at one point, there was a guy who came to Fargo, and his idea was he was going to film a show.
Oh, yeah.
About a fictional Fargo television station that was sort of in the vein of The Office, which is not a bad idea at all. Like, I think, people like that Midwestern kind of feel, and you could do a lot with it. Parks and Recs ends up excelling at it. And so he's like, he found a picture of me online and like just going through like Fargo stuff, like going through Fargo social media. And he found a picture of me and he contacted me. And he goes, "Come on, I want you to be our sportscaster." And I was like, I am not that part. And so we filmed the pilot on the day of an NDSU football game. And so I'm walking around talking to people being like, "What do you think the goal is for today? Is it a tough D? Their offense has really got a weak line today." And he's like, "This is perfect. This is great." And I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I just have no reference when it comes to any of these things. Then my wife and I go to a Vikings game. So they pick me to lead a group of people on 2 buses to a Minnesota Vikings game when they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles because Carson Wentz would be there. And so they said, "JJ, you'd be the perfect like guide for this thing." And I said, "Well, listen, we got to get to Minneapolis by 5:30 because I've got tickets to Mean Girls at the Orpheum." And they're like, "Oh, okay." But so then we go to this Vikings game and I do my best to explain football to my wife. And she's like, "Okay, so what are they doing here?" And I explain, "Okay, well, now they need 4 more yards to get another first down. Every 10 yards, they get a first down, or they get to reset the clock on the downs. They only get 4 downs." She's like, And she's like, "When do they get the kicky points?" And I said, "Well, I mean, like a field goal." And I realized, I'm not inept when it comes to sports, but I certainly don't know. I'm not like your Uncle Paul McDonald, who knows sports inside and out.
Yeah, but I mean, that's also an extreme. You're talking about a sportscaster. Like literally, that's his profession, is to be deeply knowledgeable about sports. And I can't remember the number of the episode, but go check out the episode Uncle Baseball, which we did with my Uncle Paul, who has an amazing story. That would be. I mean, I would say what you should talk like really is sort of like the average sports fan, right? The person who is actually following at the very least scores, who won, who didn't. And those are the fans who are going to have some basic topics to go into because they're hearing enough talk radio or sports TV or whatever, right? So if you listen to enough of it, I think there's enough just regurgitation of the same thing, just like the weather. Right. Like sort of that same level of small talk, and you're good at the small talk thing. So I think that's maybe where you excel, is at sports small talk. But if it was like sports analysis, that's where you would melt. Right.
Oh,
but you would be able to at the very least go, "Oh, I think I know the name of a player from that team and that right now they're doing well." Right. And say something vaguely to that effect. Right. Or let the person who you're talking to, let them talk and you just agree with the things they're saying. Right. And you agree with what they're saying emphatically, and they will think you know sports.
But isn't that the whole point? Like when someone has a sports conversation, they don't want someone who is going to agree with everything. I mean, every piece of sports radio that I've ever tuned into, every time I catch a little bit of Sports Center, like essentially that's what people in sports like. They like to have an opinion, and they like to have their opinion challenged. So it's almost like they're trying to play their own game. And
we're talking
W's they can come out of it.
Right, but we're talking sort of the difference between, performative sports talk, which is going to be specific, people who are professionals in that field talking about that particular topic. But here in the land of the North, in the land of the sports ball, just to survive, you have to learn some shorthand with just the common sports fan who is looking for agreeable small talk. Like, "Oh, did you catch this? Can you believe? Oh my God." And then you move on, right?
Yeah, like, very true. Very true.
That's like a separate discipline. And that kind of bullshit, I think you and I are both getting better at as we get older. When you live here, even as non-sports kids, you have to adopt some level of like, "Oh, yep, I heard my uncle say this phrase, And I'm going to say it now to this cashier who is engaging me in small talk about that game.
I am also a person who doesn't fully understand you need everything that's got sports on it, right? Like your T-shirt has got your favorite team,
right.
your cap has got it, your keychain has it, you've got a pennant and a flag in your office and at home. And to me, I'm like, people invest a lot of money into these things that they have absolutely no control over. Now, if you ask JJ Gordon how you could make it even better, let one of these armchair coaches come in every single year and coach, 5 plays. But that's the premise of my movie, Temporary Coach, that I'm pitching to Hollywood right now. And I want to be upfront too. If you love sports, I think that's great. I think everyone should have a passion. They should have something that they like, that they get to go and watch performance. People who are at the height of their skill set. For me, I love going to plays and watching movies and stuff like that. And it might not seem like it's the same thing, but it really is. It's a giant organization of people putting together a single thing that they're hoping entertains you in my case, or that enthralls you enough to cheer for a win on the other. There's a reason why even when the Chicago Cubs had spent 100 years without winning a World Series, fans were still adamant about how much they loved the Cubs. I lived in Chicago for a while, and my God, you go to Wrigleyville during a Cubs day game. Oh,
right.
The energy is amazing.
Right.
And we can thank sports for a lot of things outside of the realm of actual just, athletic contest. Food has changed drastically because of sports. Hot dogs would not be as popular as they are today if it were as long. Correct. If it were not for the fact that they are so associated with going to a game of some kind.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, the existence of sports, being able to channel aggression in that way, has helped keep cities like Philadelphia from just completely melting down. Because if the people who lived in Philadelphia didn't have sports to channel their anger and their aggression into, that city would be chaos. It would just be fighting in the streets constantly. So like there are even places where you need like that sort of outlet, which is another positive reason to have it. Because if I really enjoy going to sporting events, I love going to live sports, and I went to a Phillies game, and it was intense, dude. And it was like the people here, man, they need this because they're ready just to fight each other just for nothing all the time. So they need this to come and scream at people like in the middle of the field,
I think that could you imagine what they would replace that with if sports didn't exist? If it was Tina Fremsted's garden is the best garden in Philadelphia. You gotta be kidding me. Her peonies don't have anything on.
I feel like it would go here. I think it'd be more gladiatorial contests. It would be darker and deeper. Well, okay, so along those lines, it's funny because I've actually always really liked athletics and appreciated athletics, but the major say 4 or 5 sports in America, so football, baseball, basketball, I'd say golf and maybe hockey, or just the ones that could rise up to even lesser ones like soccer and stuff. Yep, I appreciate the skill and work it takes to do those things, but even just the TV product of them and everything, it just never hooked me. I just never got into it. And I never really knew why. And it wasn't really until the past 2 years where I really, really, really got into watching fighting in MMA.
Yeah.
That made me go, oh, I think that's why. Is that to me, for my taste, the stakes were never high enough in those games. Take football, for instance, at the highest level. It's really difficult for me to care about a bunch of millionaires throwing this ball from one side of the field to the other. I just don't really care that much.
Okay.
It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't do a thing as a storyline. Now, going to a live game, that's a ton of fun, way fun. I would do that anytime. Totally down for that. But following it on TV and really caring about what's going on there, it's not enough for me. It's not a compelling enough storyline. But when you look at the stakes, the things that are actually on the line for professional fighters in the MMA space, be it at UFC, Bellator, One Championship, shoot fighting or whatever. And I'm going to put boxing aside because boxing is just a totally different thing. But like the work these athletes have to put themselves through to be able to operate at the level that they do, and the risks that they take when they're doing the thing that they do, and the rewards that they get are so much smaller and so much more difficult to get in a lot of ways than the ones in other sports.
Okay. Yep.
And then when you learn about that person, because it's all on them, right? It's not a team sport. It's a person versus a person in the ring with agreed upon rules. And it's like within 15 minutes, one of us will have won and one of us will have lost. And that's going to mean a lot of different things. It could potentially mean how injured you are walking out of it, right? You could lose a fight, but if it's in submission in 30 seconds, you're not going to be that injured. You're going to have lost the fight, but no damage will have happened to you. Or you could be winning like every round in the fight and just kicking ass, but suddenly you get submitted in the final round. And now like you've done all of that. And it's a huge mess for people. And there's a lot on the line. And there was a phrase that I can't remember who I heard. It was a fighter said it in an interview. Was that you play football, you play baseball, you play basketball, but you don't play fighting.
Ooh.
It's a lot. It's just different. And for me, I was like, I'm hooked. And then on top of that, the UFC and Bellator and One Championship as just television products, they put together a damn good show, way more entertaining to me than watching a typical football game on a Sunday or something like that. So like, it got me going, oh, it was those entertainment products and the cultures around them that just wasn't sucking me in. But I just didn't find the one for me. So it's not that I don't like sports and not that I don't like those sports, but like I just never got into the day-to-day of those. That never drew me in. The stakes weren't high enough. The stories weren't interesting enough for me. But that was it. But going to them live, like going to a live baseball game, I love it. I love a leisurely baseball game. If you can watch it in the shade with some peanuts and some soda, oh my God, man, that's the best. Have some friends with you. That's an awesome way to spend an afternoon.
Did you, Tucker, ever play any sports?
I did. So from first grade, I think, or was it kindergarten maybe? We had FM soccer in town, so which was for elementary age kids. So I played FM soccer from the first year I could, which I think may have been kindergarten, all the way up through the end of sixth grade, and I was awful. I was terrible. Never scored a goal. My favorite position to play was defense because I wasn't expected to run the length of the field. My job as defense was to, if the ball gets on your side of the field, get to the ball and clear it to the other side. That's your job. But you're not in charge of the goal, so you don't have anxiety about, oh, did that get past me and therefore score a goal? Because that's the worst feeling of being in the goal. And these are massive goals for little kids to be guarding.
Right.
And you see the other team coming at you and you're like, I don't know what to do. It's just coming at me. How am I supposed to get around this? How am I supposed to anticipate what they're going to do? And being a forward was a nightmare because you constantly had to run, and I hated running. I was not built for it. I didn't want to do it. I liked soccer because I made friends during soccer, and so it was a fun time to hang out with my friends. But that was it. I tried 2 summers of baseball in the middle of all of that. I just didn't want to do it. Didn't like it. I was really into drawing comic books at that time, so I wanted to spend my summers doing comics. And FM soccer actually happened during the school year, if I remember correctly. Like there was a fall and a spring, if I remember correctly. I may not be remembering that correctly, but that was it. And I was never good at any of it. I sucked the whole time. I had one good soccer game in my 7 years of doing it. And I remember it vividly because I was on fire that day. And I remember my coach. I had the same coach all 7 years. I think if I remember correctly, his last name was it Klosterman? Man, I can't remember now. I'll have to go ask my parents if they remember. I had the same coach all 7 years. And I just remember him going, "Good job, Lucas, good job." And like screaming that over and over again from the sidelines, and me being filled with excitement. Like, oh my God, coach is actually happy with what I'm doing right now. Because I was that day I was on the ball and I would clear it to the other side every single time, just beautifully. And so defense is my position if I'm ever playing soccer again.
And do you like, that's another interesting thing is everyone uses the last names in sports, right? Like, and I can understand for sure why your coach says that, because like if he's yelling "good job, Tucker," if you're not really paying attention to what the coach is yelling, he could think you're yelling something drastically different.
Right.
So I played a season of intramural basketball in either 6th or 7th grade. I can't remember which one it was. And they had cheerleaders for it, and I remember our team won a couple times, and I think I got one basket. And kids who were mean to me during the regular school day were on my team, and so they were nice to me when we were playing. And I'm like, I don't. Why all of a sudden do you want to be nice to me? I don't get it. And beyond that, the only other sport that I really got into that's a formal sport is golf. So I played golf for a couple of years. I still every now and then will go out and play around. I'm not good at golf, but I love golf is a chatting sport, like,
right. Oh yeah. It's like a leisurely, not high intensity. You're not expected to tackle anybody.
Right. And you get some exercise because you're walking out there or you get a cart and that.
I've never gone golfing, but I know the first time I ever do, if I ever do, I'm karting it. Fuck that walking nonsense.
You don't want to walk?
No, I love walking, but I've got an opportunity to use a golf cart. Of course I'm going to use that. I never get that opportunity.
You just like the idea of driving a small vehicle.
Well, yeah, like that's an experience that I don't normally get. I normally walk all the time, so I don't need to do more of that on the golf course. I want to kart it.
Do you know that of all the sports, I think golf is one of the only ones where snacks are encouraged by the athletes?
I know. Okay, so actually, the best beef jerky I ever ate was made by a professional caddy, actually. And what was the name of this? I don't know if it exists anymore. I'll have to look up the name of this and track it down and see if it still exists. But basically, this guy was a professional caddy, might still be, and just had a passion for beef jerky, but thought all the beef jerky that you get at the store is just meh. It's just not what it could be. And so he started making his own beef jerky and bringing it with him on his rounds or whatever, and he'd share it with the golfers or whoever else he was working with, and became so popular that people wanted to buy some from him. So he started making some of it, and so he started branching it out into a company. And I remember tasting this beef jerky because it was a sponsor for a little bit of Poker Night in America when I worked there. God, what was it called now? I have to track this down.
Was it Buffalo a golf pun? Was it called like,
no, it was nothing golf related at all. I want to say it was Buffalo related. So I'll figure out what this is, and at a later date, I'll bring up the name of it and track it down. Because JJ, I tell you, man, this was next level beef jerky. I'm talking, it's ruined me for like the beef jerky that you just get in any store. And I've been I need to find it because I can't describe, except the fact that it was tender, it was chewy, it didn't taste rubbery at all. And whatever the preservative process it was going through was definitely different than what they're doing at like a mass scale.
Yeah.
So it was a little more expensive. You got a little bit less for your dollar, but like once you started a bag, you could not stop. And I remember it came in like 4 or 5 different flavors now, and it was unlike any beef jerky I've had since then or before. Got to get my hands on that. And I'm craving beef jerky. How did we start talking about beef jerky? How did this start?
Well, you brought up that a golfer,
golfing.
Golfing,
that's why.
Beef jerky.
It was the golfing thing because the snacking on golf, which you had just said.
So there are other things that I consider athletic and sportsy that I do that are not something that is a traditional sport. For example, love me some water skiing. And I'm actually pretty good at it. That's what happens when you're a lake rat as a kid. My grandfather was really good at water skiing. My mom was really good at water skiing. She's the one who taught me. And like, I can do the thing where I drop a ski and like go slalom. I never got into wakeboarding though. That just never was something I did. And it's weird because, if you go to the ski slopes in like 1994, there's two type of people, snowboarders and skiers. And the skiers don't like the snowboarders, and the snowboarders don't like the skiers because they're old and archaic and they need to get rid of this thing. And the skiers are like, this is what we've done for a long time. Now, I know you want to save the youth center, but we want to build, a new lodge.
Right.
So there are all these other things that I consider sports, but you don't see them very often. We're on the cusp of another round of the Olympics, and I do find it really interesting that people, and it's probably patriotism more than anything, but they will get really into the Olympics and be like, you're into shot put?
Right.
They'll be like, I am now because USA's taking home the gold. Let's go. Let's go. I find those type of cheering and rah-rah-rahs to be some of my favorite.
Yeah, to have like a crowd on your side and to join in.
When I was a kid, my dad was constantly a jokester and always pulled pranks. And one of the pranks he pulled on me was he had a picture of himself with Kirby Puckett that was at some my dad owned a company that made sunflower seeds. So I think like his sunflower seeds were the official Twins sunflower seeds a couple seasons. So he got to go to this thing and like shake hands and talk to the players. And he had a picture with Kirby Puckett. And he told me like, yep, that's from when I used to play for the Minnesota Twins. And of course, my dad was the guy who threw a baseball with me, and so I thought, oh my god, my dad played for the Twins, and so I told everybody, to the point that even now, when my wife and I are walking into a wedding, and I spot my cousin Andrew, who I hadn't seen in years, and I said, I bet you dollars to donuts that one of the first things that Andrew says to us is, hey, remember when you told everyone about how your dad played for the Twins? And I went up and I was like, hi, Andrew. And he's like, hey, JJ. And I'm like, this is my wife, Jill. And he's like, so good to meet you. Did he tell you about how his dad played for the Twins? It could not have been more perfect when it came down to it.
JJ, I don't mean to derail you really quick, but I just have a breaking news bulletin that I want to insert here before we go for it. Is that I figured out the name of that jerky.
Oh, good.
It's King Made Jerky. If you go to kingmadejerky.com, JJ, I suggest you go there right now. These are not sponsors of the show, and it sounds like they sponsor the show right now, but they don't. But I'd love it if they did. I would highly recommend getting their sweet chili pepper flavor, but I'd get the assorted packs as well. King Made Jerky was the brand.
And King Made is one word, right?
Kingmadejerky.com. And you'll see what I'm talking about. This is next level. Yep, it's low sugar, low sodium, gluten-free, using 100% grass-fed beef flank steak. Yeah, this is next level stuff.
I think I'm going to pick out one of these assorted packs. Sold out. They're all sold out.
Okay, well, we'll have to. I'll keep an eye on when they're not sold out. Because
great. So now I want beef jerky and I want this good stuff, but I can't get a hold of it. Like, they should sponsor this podcast. We've clearly changed the world for them. But people might be listening to this 2 years from now, so still go to kingmadejerky.com and maybe that's in stock for you. Right?
Well, I'm gonna pursue these guys because I'm like, if they're not, I want to make sure that they're still making this jerky, or if they sold the recipe to someone, if they're shutting down and someone else is gonna make it, because dude, it was that good.
So another aspect of sports, while we're on this subject, is the sponsorship, and there is something that I love about how athletes will sponsor something, even if it has nothing to do with the sport that they play. For example, name a sport you associate with hot dogs.
Well, baseball.
Right. Yep. I would think the same thing. But they're like, nope, we're going to have Michael Jordan talk about ballpark franks. We're literally going to have him talk about ballpark franks.
Yep.
And so
well, remember, he was a baseball player for a bit.
That does not count. I know nothing about sports, and I know that time in the minor leagues for Michael Jordan does not count, even though it's a pivotal plot point in the movie Space Jam.
I was about to ask. I was like, I'm getting this memory bubbling to the top of there being a reference to his baseball career in that movie. There is one. They do talk about him playing baseball.
He's not playing basketball in that movie. He's playing Like, in fact, it's really funny because he goes up and he strikes out and they come back and they're like, those are some good swings, Mike, that was great swings. He's like, no, I struck out. And they're like, yeah, you did your best. That's
right.
better than I'm doing.
Do you think that was Michael Jordan's Chris Gaines period?
Oh, without a doubt. Nice that you can throw in a Garth Brooks piece in there too.
I had a quick Google Garth Brooks persona because the name was not coming up. I could see the soul patch. I could see in my head the album cover, the amazing album cover. But
he's so emo.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You were talking about your relationship with your dad in sports. My dad is also a massive sports fan. And so, we always had, especially for football, dad's a football guy. So, Minnesota Vikings was always has always been his team. So, Sundays, hearing Minnesota Vikings play was actually like just a regular sound. And I just never was interested in sitting down and watching it, but I also loved that it was around. Like, I honestly think the ambiance provided by sports is awesome. My dad would always be watching football. My grandfather on my mom's side would always be watching baseball, but more often than not, he'd be watching baseball with the sound muted. So like he just couldn't hear that well. So he would just always have baseball playing on TV, but then he'd be listening to you and talking to you and then just looking at the TV from time to time to follow the score. And so like having baseball on in the room, but on mute is very relaxing to me. Because it like puts me in that sort of state of mind of what he was doing, which he was this like ultra chill, almost monk-like chill guy. But whereas when dad watches sports is the exact opposite. It's like the audio is cranked up and dad is fucking screaming at the TV. And it gets pretty funny how upset he gets. And I didn't understand it until I got into watching fighting, because when I watch things like Francis Ngannou knock out Stipe and I want to do like flips, even though I'm not physically capable of doing flips. That level of excitement where you get invested in the struggle of the athlete.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That is actually a really amazing feeling.
I think that like the feeling you have for a moment, because when sports comes down to it, like you're reacting to a moment. It's that moment of, is this ball going to stay fair? Is it going to go foul? Is it going to make it between the goalposts? Are you going, is someone going to have an over the head Pele style kick and get it into the net? These are the moments that I think are amazing. And for me, it's just like, okay, so that's really what I watch, I guess. Okay, so here's who I am. I would like to watch the highlights after a game and show me the like 5 points in this game that mattered the most.
Right.
And then I will digest that rather than sitting there the whole time and trying to figure out what the moments are going to be. And once a year, my dad used to take me, and his business partner would take his kids, and we'd go and stay overnight in Minneapolis and see a Twins game. And I never remember who they played. I remember one time it was like 15 innings because it was like a pitcher's duel, and so there was no score. And so by the time it hit I was like, the game ends after 9 innings, right? And he's like, nope, because it's 0-0 and they're not going to take a tie. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, someone just like lob it in there.
Someone just give up. Someone give up, please.
Yeah, like,
can they just fight each other?
And there have been games that have gone on for hours and hours and hours. And that's one thing. With football, you more or less know how long this game is going to be. Certainly with basketball and soccer, because there's a very distinct clock that goes into it.
Right.
But something like baseball, I mean, it could go really quickly.
Well, but also the thing that's so interesting about the baseball angle to it is that certainly, like you said, you could easily institute some kind of a rule that stops it after 9 innings, right? Like that is not beyond the ability of humans to do. However, that's not part of baseball culture. part of baseball culture is that, yeah, the game goes for as long as it goes, and you just leave whenever you leave, and the game's going to keep going, and they're going to do this like 300 times a year, right? Like, there's this built-in desire for things to be repetitive and long that's built into the culture of baseball. So I think you wouldn't, at this point, be able to institute some kind of a rule without there being some sort of backlash in the deep baseball community itself, because that, I mean, the fandom at that level is a deeply embedded culture. You know, families that are Twins families, right? Like, yep, we love the Twins in this family. My grandparents love the Twins, my parents love the Twins, and I love the Twins. And it's part of our ritual to constantly watch them and follow along. So it's kind of, I'm not complaining here. I'm just saying it's kind of amazing to think about the fact that a sport will have it's so old and has such an entrenched culture, such a lineage, that there are these cultural parts of it that have their drawbacks, but will probably never get changed, right?
And there is something to the tune of the fact that like baseball rules have changed over time, but it's because literally baseball's been around so long that technology has changed that has allowed it to do things like they never used to have night games, because when baseball first started, huge electric stadium lights did not exist.
Right.
And then they started existing. Cross-country travel became something that didn't take days. It took hours. And so they said, like, okay, well, we can have more teams that play each other and we'll have different conferences. The thing that amazes me the most when it comes down to the baseball in general is the fact that baseball fans know what they want out of the experience, right? A baseball fan shows up and they're looking forward to seeing a game that pits these players against each other. And I think baseball is also one of the sports too, where you can start your career very young and you can still be in a career like into your 40s. And you can still perform at that. You know, you can't do that in things like swimming. You can't do that in things like football. You know, maybe golf probably is another one where you can get pretty high up there in years, but I have an appreciation for that. To me, baseball is the lowest threshold if you want to start getting into sports that you can enjoy. I also think it's the sport that we've adapted into movies and music more than anything else.
Right. It's sort of the quintessential American pastime, right? That's what it's referred to. It's the one that's referred to as a pastime, literally a thing you do to pass the time. I think I just had a revelation too, as we were talking about getting into sports and what makes things interesting, and my own interest in fighting sports in the last like 2 years. It kind of coincides, I realized, with my exit from poker television. So for like 7 years, like on a consistent basis, because I had to for my job, I was watching like the least action-packed competition you can possibly imagine, where it's just a bunch of people sitting around with cards at a table with chips. And so like for years, I just watched the most inane, anticlimactic, uninteresting thing. And the exact opposite of which is watching two guys like fight in an octagon. So I think maybe that's what it is too, is that my brain is just so bored from watching poker for 7 years that it needs fight. It just needs fighting to just wipe everything clean.
Is there a sport that you feel you would like to get into one day, but you just haven't gotten there yet?
Like as a fan,
yeah. Like something that you think at some point, yeah, I probably, I wouldn't mind if when I retire, I can spend some time trying to learn this and be a fan of this.
That's a really good question. Goodness.
Because I'll tell you this, I'm surrounded by people who are football obsessed. You know, like football is king to them. And I don't ever see myself as someone getting way into football. I just don't think that that's not, something that I will be, 100% a fan of. but there certainly are, like, when I hear you talk about MMA, or I hear somebody talk about watching golf, like getting into like watching the sport of golf, I think maybe there's something I'm missing out on here that I really should give some time, talent, and certainly treasure over to be able to understand a little bit more and get into. I own 3 pieces of athletic clothing with different teams on them, because there are times when I have to go out and I have to do a piece for the Minnesota Vikings, or I've got to go to an event where we're cheering on the NDSU Bison football team. And there's not really something like that. I know that if I was in Hollywood and I was on a hit TV show, I would definitely learn about basketball, because it seems like that's where all the celebrities go, because they all want to be courtside for basketball.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe that's something I have to learn, basketball.
I don't know. Like, the fact that I played soccer gives me, and I have a deep appreciation for how athletic you have to be to play soccer at an elite level. Like, the amount of cardio those players have to do is just absolutely insane. So I could see myself getting into that at some point deeper, but I don't know, like, not necessarily on a huge level. I could just see other fighting sports popping up that I follow more, because they all kind of tie into MMA at the end of the day. And another thing that's so exciting about MMA at this point in time right now is, compared to all these other sports, it is so young. And so it is going through a crazy evolution right now, where even the fighters from like 5 years ago are nowhere near as elite as the fighters fighting right now, because the sport changes so quickly, because people see new techniques that they're doing and new testing regimens. And since they've gotten so good at cracking down on doping, that it's really become this really amazing test between true athletes who are really doing a lot of things. There's actually a ton of strategy that can go into these things depending on the fighters, and there can be all sorts of interesting things leading up to a fight. Like, sometimes fighters, they're just totally cool with each other. It's really respectful, and they're like, yeah, this is going to be an interesting competition. Let's see who wins this. Deep respect to you, sir or madam. And then there are the ones who decide to build heat between the two of them, because at the end of the day, it is a show, right? Like, UFC, Bellator, these are promotions. These are not leagues. So it's not like the NFL, where you have this, tournament structure at some point that everyone's going to play through and then crown a champion at the end of that thing. That's just not how fighting in general works, because it just can't work. The amount of damage you take in a fight means at most you shouldn't be fighting more than 4 times a year at most. And the top level fighters are only usually fighting once a year, maybe twice a year. So it just doesn't work that way. It's really more or less of, who do people want to see fight, and who can, and what are the things that go into it. And in the meantime, the fighters are just getting better and better and better, both male and female. The women's divisions are insane. The fights that are coming out of the athletes that are coming out of that are absolute killers, and they're becoming sort of the national darlings of their countries too, right? Like, fighting in general, if we're talking all the fighting sports, so MMA, boxing, you could say even martial, like taekwondo competitions, things that happen in the Olympics, wrestling, etc., jiu-jitsu. All of these things have their own disciplines and their own sports with their own rule sets that you can go compete in. And they're all getting better and better, and more people are finding them. And then those things bleed into MMA. So then you're seeing the various techniques getting put into like this blended combination. And once you have amazing fighters, or anyone who kicks down the door in a new area for a new type of person, you have even better ones that follow up behind them. So we're just watching an explosion of a sport and a discipline and a culture that is absolutely fascinating to watch. And you really do fall in love with some of these fighters, because they're really amazing people. One of my favorite fighters is Amanda Nunes. She holds 2 belts in 2 weight divisions in the UFC. She is the most dominant female fighter on the planet. She's the first openly gay UFC champion in the world. Her and her wife just had their first child last year, I believe. And when she gets in the ring, she absolutely dominates. And when she's outside the ring doing interviews, she's like the nicest, coolest person. You just want to hang out with her. And she's gone through some crazy struggles. She's from Brazil. She's just gone through all this crazy stuff to get where she's at. And so when she's in the ring, you're really rooting for her. You're really going, this is someone who really earned where they're at. And this next loss or win could really change the trajectory of their livelihood going forward. So
you're someone who, it's not necessarily the team. You're more interested in the individual. So,
it's just it's the struggle they're going through. It's what they have to do. It's all, there is a team of people behind them, right? There's their family supporting them. There's the trainers. So it's not like any person is an island until you get into the octagon. Then they can't help you at that point. They can't come in and punch them for you. That's totally on you. The one thing that they can do for you at that point is throw in the towel if they feel like they need to protect you. And that's also what the ref is going to do for you too. Like fighting is also a sport where when you're in there competing, the ref is has the unilateral power to go, you know what? I think you've lost and we're just going to stop it now. We're done. You've lost, because they have to be able to do that to protect the person, because you have to protect the fighter from themselves. Right. So there's this, the first and most important thing that the refs will tell, specifically in MMA, each fighter in the locker rooms beforehand is, you need to protect yourself at all times. And what that means is you do not stop fighting your opponent until I tell you to stop. That is the moment you stop. Because if you are fighting and you believe you've knocked out your opponent and you stop fighting, but your opponent is actually not knocked out and they come at you and they're still fighting and the ref hasn't stopped it. Well, now you've let down your guard and you're open to attack and you're open to getting hurt. And there's also times where fighters in the past, before that rule existed, would fake being knocked out to then get the other fighter to lower their guard so they could go after them. So that's why when you watch UFC and you see someone get hit and they hit the ground and then you see the fighter go after them and start punching them on the ground, they're supposed to do that because the ref is the one in charge of saying the fight is over. Oh. And oftentimes, if let's say you've gone a full 3 rounds where you're in the middle of the 3rd round and it's been one-sided the whole time, right? Let's just obvious. Like one fighter is taking all the punches and their face is bloodied up and the other person is just dominating. They may not have knocked them out. The fight may still be going. There may still be time in the clock, but the ref can go, you know what? I've seen enough. I'm stopping this. Yep. Sorry. I'm going to protect the fighter. At this point, we're done. And so they'll step in and they'll stop it. So that's a sport where you have that power. Boxing's another one that does not happen in football, right? Like you are playing until there's a winner. There's a time period you're playing through. And then that's basically it. Certain players might get ejected or protected, but for the most part, this competition's going on. Versus in fighting, the next 15 minutes are going to be incredibly dramatic. They could be over in 15. They could be over in 30 seconds. And you don't know how it's going to be.
I find that you have got such an amazing passion for this. And
it's such a good show, JJ. At some point, if you're ever feeling up to it, I'm going to treat you to a pay-per-view.
Okay.
If you're ever feeling up to it, I'll treat you to a pay-per-view, just you and me. We'll sit down and we'll have some Diet Cokes. And
even the concept of pay-per-view, like that's what sports is built on. Sure, right. There have been concerts that have been in pay-per-view, but pay-per-view, the world of boxing and the world of, like fighting, like that's what built pay-per-view up to the level that it is at this point. And so, to me, I think during the pandemic, we learned that people rely on sports for more than just a distraction. They rely on sports because it's the thing that they feel that they are maybe an expert in. It's the thing that they feel that reminds them what a normal day is. It builds on nostalgia. It builds on personal pride, and all of these things go into sports, and we miss that aspect of it. So going forward, I think it'll be interesting to see how people appreciate those sports even more.
Well, thinking in terms of storyline, JJ, if I can for just one more few minutes,
please do
opine on or talk about MMA. How's this for a storyline, right? And this is something that is 100% verified, absolutely true. This is not written up by a Hollywood writer. All right. This is absolutely true. There's this guy. His name is Francis Ngannou. Okay. Born in Cameroon in abject poverty, grows up working, doing child labor in a sand mine. Okay. Literally shoveling sand all day, every day through his childhood, which builds up his muscles, Conan the Barbarian style, right? So if you think about like the opening of Conan the Barbarian, where he's a kid and they start making him push that like stone in a circle, and then you fast forward and he's an adult and now he's a massive guy. That's Francis, right? Okay. So he's living in poverty. It's like a war-torn country. He's working in a sand mine. He wants to escape, has no way to escape, ends up crossing the Sahara Desert 7 different times trying to get into Europe, gets caught, gets sent back, and does it again 7 different times on foot, crosses the desert to try to escape his circumstances. Finally, through a bunch of trial and circumstance, ends up in Spain in jail, and then for illegal entry, and then lives as a homeless person in Spain for a few months because he has nowhere else to go. Somehow is able to like get his way to France, hitchhike his way to France, where he is homeless in France and dreams of being the next Mike Tyson. So starts taking boxing lessons. Okay. Now, this guy is, when you look at him, you go, how does this person exist? You look at him, he's 6'4". He is the most muscular dude you will see and carries it in a way that makes you go, there's no way this guy is real. This guy looks like he's generated by some sort of CG superhero machine, right? How is this guy real? And the guy can generate more force, more punching force. He literally currently has the world record for punching force, not just in the UFC, but in the world, right? So he goes and starts taking boxing lessons in France, starts getting like amateur fights in France. And he is just this phenom, right? He's just walking into the ring and just punching the other guy and knocking them out. He's just that strong. So he gets word of, you know, what you really should be doing, where the real money's at right now, is not in boxing, it's in MMA. You should go over to the MMA world and start fighting there. That's where you're going to find some real money. And you could become maybe champion of like one of the big promotions. He ends up getting signed by the UFC, which is the premier promotion in the world. Like if you are a professional fighter, being a champion in some weight division in the UFC, that is the top. That is the best thing you can do. And in his weight class, he is a heavyweight. So just in fighting in general, the champion of a heavyweight division, that is the baddest man on the planet. That is the most dangerous person, just basically. Almost always, if you're talking fisticuffs, you're talking hand-to-hand combat, you want to find the heavyweight champion of MMA, and that is the most dangerous guy on the planet, right? So they bring him in as a heavyweight. Within 2 fights, he's knocking guys out, so they give him a title shot against Stipe Miocic. So that's crazy to be in the UFC for 2 fights and then you get a title shot. That's insane, of the heavyweight. So immediately they give him a shot at the champ. He's been fighting professionally for maybe 2 years at this point. Usually you fight for 10 years before you can even think about getting to that level. He loses that fight to Stipe, loses his next fight, and he's super humbled as a fighter and realizes, you know, I've been just relying on my sheer power and everyone telling me how amazing I am. I haven't actually learned how to fight. I'm going to start learning how to fight. So he starts training with like the best trainers in the world, in wrestling, in jiu-jitsu, in boxing, in you name it. If it's in kickboxing, if it's going to be something good for fighting, he's learning it. And he starts winning fights, but he's still winning fights in this fashion where he's just getting lucky, where he's basically striking the guy early on within a minute and knocking them out. But he's doing it consistently over and over and over. He's just starching guys. And they finally give him this a couple months ago, a rematch with Stipe for the championship. And it's a vastly different fighter than you saw last time versus Stipe. And now Francis is the full package. He has the most power on planet Earth in his body. And he is a complete fighter who can stuff takedowns, who can do all these other things. And he like mutilates Stipe within a round and a half and takes the championship belt. And he is now the current reigning heavyweight champion of the greatest fight promotion in the world and in history. And he started doing child labor in a sand mine in Cameroon. And a month ago, he was given a parade in the streets of Cameroon while he wore his belt because he became their national hero from his story, right? That happens in fighting. And that happened over a period of like 6 years, and we all got to watch it happen. Isn't that story insane?
That is insane. And like, that is what I'm talking about. That's why people can get into sports. They can find these moments that just blow you away. Yeah. And it's, you know, the story of Babe Ruth, the story of Tiger Woods, all of these things are what build us up and make us love sports a lot. Tucker, I can't think of a better way to end than with that story, because that really that hits a lot of the marks. If you're into sports, I hope that this wasn't too too much of low-hanging fruit.
I bet we upset so many people who are both into sports and hate sports, right? Because for the people that hate sports, it's like, why are you talking about a topic I hate? And for the people who love sports, it's, you two clearly have no authority in this realm to be talking about this comment.
You guys might as well be talking about like the cultivation of bay leaves at this point.
Right. I guess we can go back to musicals at some point.
Oh, let's do that. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World. This has been a lot of fun. And if you're new to JJ Meets World, welcome. If you've been listening for a long time, thanks for sticking around. And I just want to remind people too, like, we changed our format a little bit, and I'm getting a lot of really great feedback. Yeah. Sometimes it's an interview. Sometimes it's Tucker and I talking and breaking down a subject. Sometimes it's about Tucker and I arguing about what's the top 5 comedies of all time.
I've gotten a lot of negative feedback of directed straight at me from our comedy, our top 5 comedies of all time episode. Yep. Because, and I understand, like, I agree, like, yeah, I know we were playing like a lawyer league game, like no one's going to be happy with this. I know I threw like a monkey in the wrench, like a wrench in the thing there with Princess Bride, but it's actually tickled me pink, like to hear people going, God damn it, Tucker, why would you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, it makes me happy for some.
Tucker has always been an agent of chaos, and so I'm glad that you can get into that. Okay, so going.
Also, by the way, JJ, we're knocking on 250 here pretty soon.
Right around the corner.
We're about 8 or 9 episodes away from 250, so we got to figure out what's some special we want to do. And also, and we're both at fault for this, but I don't think we've crossed a single thing off of our New Year's resolutions.
We certainly have not. So we need to really
figure that out pretty soon.
Because we're almost half done with the year, so we're gonna have to get some serious things done.
Luckily, I don't think we made any bet that we had to do a certain thing if we don't. So
right. I just recently, if you've never seen the video we have on our social media of when I ate a spoonful of mustard for our 600th like on Facebook, that one, I just recently watched that with a new super fan of the show, and he thought that was the funniest thing he ever saw. He's like, you should do this like once a month. And I said,
we should. What we should do is make you learn the process of making your own mustard, and then you have to eat that.
That's even worse.
It's like saying you go out to the stick and pick which one I'm hitting you with.
Yep.
Make you actually make the thing you're about to eat and vomit.
Tucker, I enjoy spending time with you. I have a blast.
Likewise.
Let's look forward to the next one. And also, I should throw this out there too. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on JJ Meets World, I think that would be a fun way to open up some of these. So you can submit that to us. JJ Meets World podcast at gmail.com. You can send us an email there. You can reach out to us on social media. You could start a rival podcast that is just a list of suggestions that we could listen to. And we'll go off of that. I know in the upcoming weeks, one of the things I want to do is I want to have a podcast with you, Tucker, where we talk about other podcasts that we listen to.
Let's do it.
and just kind of, I like to be able to push people in other directions because we only release one episode a week. And so there's a lot of other time for you to fill.
Well, be warned, I'm going to bring it to a dark place.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I'm into some weird shit.
Tucker likes to sit in the dark and listen to baking podcasts, but the whole time he's like, no, don't use any more vanilla. No. That's why he has to constantly move as his neighbors are mad about his shouting.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
All right, peace out. Buy yourself a label maker. It'll change your life. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. It should be a sport and is not a sport, how good I am at making ribs.